The news landed like a thunderclap on Monday, May 19, 2025. A sitting member of the United States Congress, Representative LaMonica McIver of New Jersey, faced federal charges. This wasn't a quiet announcement. It came directly from the Department of Justice. The charges themselves were serious. They included assaulting, impeding, and interfering with law enforcement officers. Such accusations against a federal lawmaker are rare. They immediately signaled a significant and potentially explosive legal battle. The implications stretched far beyond a single individual. They touched upon the very fabric of congressional oversight and the separation of powers, especially in a politically charged environment. The announcement was made by Alina Habba. She is the acting U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. Her name might ring a bell for some. Ms. Habba previously served as a personal lawyer for former President Donald Trump. This connection, of course, did not go unnoticed. It added an immediate layer of political intrigue to the proceedings. The charges, 2 counts of assaulting, resisting, and impeding federal officers, carry a potential penalty. If convicted, Congresswoman McIver could face up to a year in prison. This development set the stage for a high-stakes confrontation, not just in a courtroom, but in the court of public opinion. These charges stemmed from an incident that occurred earlier in the month. The date was May 9, 2025. The location was the Delaney Hall ICE detention facility in Newark, New Jersey. This facility has been a subject of scrutiny and protest before. The Department of Justice's decision to press charges more than a week after the incident also raised eyebrows. It suggested a period of deliberation, or, perhaps, as some would later argue, a period of political calculation. The timing, just like the charges themselves, became an instant point of contention and debate across the political spectrum. The fact that a member of Congress, someone sworn to uphold the laws of the land, now stands accused of breaking those very laws, is a stark development. Representative McIver had only recently taken office. She replaced the late Congressman Donald Payne Jr. in April 2024. Her tenure was still in its early stages. Now, it was marked by a federal indictment. This event promised to test her resilience, the support of her colleagues, and the very nature of political discourse in an already divided nation. The story was just beginning to unfold, but its significance was immediately apparent to all who were watching. The day in question, May 9, 2025, was not initially planned as a day of confrontation. At least, not from the perspective of the congressional delegation. They were there for a stated purpose: oversight. But the atmosphere outside the Delaney Hall ICE detention facility in Newark was tense. Protesters had gathered. They were voicing their concerns about the treatment of detainees and the facility's operations. ICE agents were present, forming a line. They were tasked with maintaining security and preventing unauthorized access to the federal facility. It was a familiar scene, in some ways a microcosm of the larger national debate on immigration. A scuffle reportedly broke out. This occurred as ICE agents were blocking protesters. The protesters, it seems, were attempting to approach or enter the facility gates. Details of how the scuffle began are still somewhat murky, likely to be a key point in any legal proceedings. However, it involved physical contact. There was pushing, there was shoving. And in the midst of this, Representative LaMonica McIver found herself at the center of the storm. Accusations from the Justice Department painted a picture of her actively assaulting and interfering with the federal officers on duty. During this chaotic incident, another notable figure was involved. Newark Mayor Ras Baraka was also present at Delaney Hall. He too became entangled in the events. Mayor Baraka was detained by federal agents. The charge leveled against him at the time was trespassing. He had reportedly been blocked from entering the facility. His detention added another layer of complexity and local political significance to the unfolding situation. However, it's important to note that the trespassing charges against Mayor Baraka were later dismissed by acting U.S. Attorney Alina Habba's office, a detail that contrasts sharply with the pursuit of charges against Congresswoman McIver. The scene was undoubtedly chaotic. Eyewitness accounts and any available footage would become crucial in piecing together the sequence of events. What started as a congressional visit, intended to scrutinize conditions within a federal facility, escalated. It escalated into a physical confrontation. It resulted in the temporary detention of a mayor, and now, serious federal charges against a member of Congress. The events of May 9th at Delaney Hall were no longer just a local dispute. They had become a federal case with national implications, raising questions about the conduct of all parties involved that day. Congresswoman LaMonica McIver has been clear about her reasons for being at the Delaney Hall ICE detention facility. She stated unequivocally that she was there to conduct congressional oversight. This is a fundamental responsibility of members of Congress. They are tasked with ensuring that federal agencies and facilities are operating correctly. They are also tasked with ensuring they are treating individuals under their care humanely. McIver emphasized her focus on the treatment of detainees. This is a long-standing concern for many civil rights advocates and lawmakers when it comes to immigration detention centers across the country. She was not alone in this mission. Representative McIver was accompanied by two of her congressional colleagues, Representatives Bonnie Watson Coleman and Robert Menendez Jr., both Democrats from New Jersey, were also present. Their joint presence underscored the seriousness of their purpose. They were there to address specific reports. These reports detailed numerous issues at the Delaney Hall facility. Concerns included allegations of invalid operating permits. There were also worries about significant plumbing and electrical problems, and critically, there were reports of fire code violations, which could pose a direct threat to the safety of detainees and staff alike. The delegation's visit was framed as an attempt to get first-hand information. They wanted to inspect the conditions and speak to those affected. Such visits are a standard part of legislative due diligence. They allow lawmakers to gather facts beyond official reports. They can then use this information to inform potential legislation or advocate for necessary changes. For McIver, representing a New Jersey district, the conditions at a facility within her state would naturally be of particular concern. Her actions on May 9th, she maintains, were in direct service to her constituents and her duties as a legislator. The context of this oversight visit is crucial. It provides the backdrop against which the subsequent confrontation and charges must be viewed. Was this a routine inspection that spiraled out of control, or was there an attempt to obstruct legitimate congressional inquiry? These are questions that will undoubtedly be explored. McIver's team has emphasized that her presence was solely for these oversight purposes. They argue that any actions she took were in response to an escalating situation created by others, not an attempt to initiate conflict. This narrative of a duty-bound visit interrupted by an aggressive response forms a core part of her defense. The heart of the charges against Congresswoman McIver lies in the physical interactions that occurred during the May 9th incident. The Department of Homeland Security reportedly released video footage. This footage, according to some descriptions, shows a chaotic scene. It allegedly captures moments of shoving and pushing. These altercations involved various individuals and law enforcement personnel. Within this melee, Congresswoman McIver is reportedly seen. Some accounts suggest she sideswiped officials. Other descriptions include her being pushed by law enforcement. The interpretation of these moments is now highly contested. The criminal complaint filed against McIver provides more specific allegations. It claims that she slammed her forearm into the body of one federal agent. It further alleges that she used each of her forearms to forcibly strike another agent. These are serious accusations of physical assault. The complaint also suggests a sequence of events. It states that McIver rushed after agents who were in the process of arresting Newark Mayor Ras Baraka. It further alleges she shouted to protesters, urging them to surround the mayor. This portrayal suggests an attempt to interfere with a lawful arrest and incite protesters. However, this official narrative is strongly disputed by McIver and her legal team. Her lawyer, Paul J. Fishman, himself a former U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, has offered a starkly different interpretation. Fishman has stated that it was ICE agents who escalated the situation. He argues that Congresswoman McIver was performing her congressional duties. She was attempting to observe and de-escalate, not to assault or impede. This counter-narrative suggests the footage may be selectively interpreted, or that it doesn't tell the whole story of the interaction and the preceding provocations. The existence of video evidence often seems like it should clarify matters, but its interpretation can become a battleground itself. It's also worth noting that after the fracas, Representative McIver reportedly proceeded with her planned tour of the detention center. This tour, lasting about an hour, was also captured on video. This detail might be used by her defense. It could suggest that the earlier incident did not completely derail her oversight mission. It could also imply that the authorities on site did not, at that immediate moment, view her actions as warranting her removal or arrest. The full context of all available footage, and who controls its release and interpretation, will be paramount as this case moves forward. The tape exists, but what it truly shows is now a matter of fierce debate. Congresswoman LaMonica McIver has not been silent in the face of these federal charges. Her response has been swift and defiant. She has categorically denied any wrongdoing. More than that, she has asserted that the charges leveled against her are purely political. This is a strong claim. It suggests that the prosecution is not based on the merits of the evidence. Instead, she argues, it is driven by other, ulterior motives. This defense shifts the focus from the events at Delaney Hall to the motivations of those bringing the charges, particularly the Office of Acting U.S. Attorney Alina Habba. Adding weight to her stance, McIver revealed that she was offered a plea deal by the acting district attorney's office. She declined it. Rejecting a plea deal is often a risky move. It indicates a defendant's strong belief in their innocence. It also shows their willingness to fight the charges in court. McIver stated that the charges distort her actions on that day. She reaffirmed her commitment to her duties. These duties include legislative oversight. They also include serving the people of her district. Her refusal to accept a deal sends a clear message. She intends to be vindicated. In her public statements, McIver has emphasized the context of her visit. She reiterated that she was at the ICE facility to inspect the treatment of detainees. She maintains that law enforcement agents, not her or the protesters, created an unsafe confrontation. This narrative directly counters the prosecution's claims that she was the aggressor. By framing the incident as one where officials overreacted or deliberately escalated tensions during a legitimate congressional inquiry, she challenges the very foundation of the case against her. Her supporters have amplified this message, particularly on social media platforms like X, formerly known as Twitter. The accusation of a politically motivated prosecution is particularly potent given the current political climate. With Alina Habba, a former lawyer for Donald Trump, heading the office bringing the charges, questions about impartiality were inevitable. McIver and her allies are leaning into this. They are framing the prosecution as an attempt by a Justice Department influenced by Trump-era figures to intimidate and silence a Democratic lawmaker. This defense strategy aims to discredit the prosecution itself. It seeks to portray McIver not as a lawbreaker, but as a victim of political targeting. This is a battle that will be fought both in the courtroom and in the arena of public perception. Section 6. A chorus of condemnation. Democrats rally in support. The charges against Representative LaMonica McIver did not go unanswered by her colleagues and political allies. Almost immediately a wave of support emerged, particularly from Democratic leadership and caucuses within Congress. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, along with other key figures like Catherine Clark, Pete Aguilar, Ted Lieu, and Joe Neguse, issued a powerful joint statement. They didn't mince words. They condemned the charges as extreme and baseless. This strong language from the highest levels of House Democratic leadership signaled a unified front in her defense and a deep skepticism about the prosecution's motives. The Congressional Black Caucus, a historically influential group of which McIver is a member, also weighed in forcefully. They labeled the charges as bogus. Furthermore, they predicted that these charges would ultimately fail in court. This sentiment reflects a belief not just in McIver's innocence, but also in the perceived weakness of the case against her. Their statement serves as both a show of solidarity and a challenge to the credibility of the Justice Department's actions in this specific instance. The backing of such a prominent caucus adds significant political weight to McIver's defense. Support also came from the Democratic Women's Caucus. They echoed the concerns about the nature of the charges. They criticized them as being politically motivated. More specifically, they characterized the prosecution as an attempt to silence dissent. This framing aligns with McIver's own assertions. It paints the legal action not as a pursuit of justice, but as a tool of political intimidation. By highlighting the potential chilling effect on free speech and legitimate protest, the caucus broadened the implications of the case beyond just Representative McIver herself. It links her situation to larger concerns about democratic norms and the weaponization of the legal system. Even locally, support was evident. Newark Mayor Ras Baraka, who himself was detained during the May 9th incident, expressed his unwavering support for Congresswoman McIver. He stated that he expects her to be fully vindicated. His perspective is particularly relevant, given his first-hand experience of the events at Delaney Hall. The dismissal of trespassing charges against him, while McIver faces more serious federal counts, has not gone unnoticed. It further fuels the narrative among supporters that McIver is being unfairly targeted. This broad coalition of support, from local city hall to the highest echelons of Congress, demonstrates the deep well of outrage these charges have provoked within the Democratic Party. Section 7. The political chessboard ripples beyond New Jersey. The charges against Representative LaMonica McIver are not merely a local New Jersey legal matter, they resonate deeply within the national political landscape. This case has quickly become a flashpoint in the ongoing, often contentious relationship between the executive branch, particularly the Department of Justice, and the legislative branch. The accusation that the charges are a blatant attempt by the Trump administration to intimidate Congress, as voiced by House Democratic leaders, directly implicates the former president and his allies. It suggests a continuation of political battles, even with a change in presidential administrations, especially if key appointments are seen as politically aligned. The involvement of Alina Habba, the interim U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, is a significant factor in these broader political interpretations. Her past role as a personal lawyer for Donald Trump cannot be easily dismissed in this context. It fuels suspicions among Democrats that the prosecution may be tainted by partisan motivations. Conversely, supporters of the charges, like House Committee on Homeland Security Chairman Mark Green, argue that this is a straightforward application of the rule of law. Green stated, "No matter how privileged you are, you will be subject to the rule of law." This sets up a classic political confrontation, one side alleging political persecution, the other claiming impartial justice. The case also touches upon the sensitive and highly partisan issue of immigration enforcement. ICE facilities like Delaney Hall have long been sites of protest and controversy. Any incident involving altercations at such a facility, especially one involving a member of Congress critical of ICE policies, is bound to be amplified. Reports indicate that Trump administration officials and their allies had previously called for charges against McIver and the other lawmakers present on May 9th. Attorney General Pam Bondi, a prominent figure in Republican circles, has also previously promised to target officials accused of impeding immigration enforcement. This suggests a pre-existing intent by some to pursue such cases. Furthermore, the Justice Department is reportedly considering a significant policy shift. This involves potentially dropping its long-standing requirement that career prosecutors specializing in public corruption must approve indictments of U.S. lawmakers. If such a policy change were implemented, it could make it easier to bring charges against elected officials. Critics would argue this lowers the bar for politically motivated prosecutions. Supporters might say it removes unnecessary hurdles to holding powerful individuals accountable. The McIver case, therefore, could be a test case or even a catalyst for such shifts in DOJ policy, with far-reaching implications for how political figures are investigated and prosecuted in the future. Section 8. Motive and machination allegations of a targeted prosecution. The central defense being mounted by Representative LaMonica McIver and her allies is that this prosecution is not a good faith effort to uphold the law. Instead, they argue it is a politically motivated attack. The speed with which this narrative took hold speaks volumes about the current state of trust in governmental institutions, particularly the Department of Justice, when high-profile political figures are involved. The claim is that McIver was targeted not because of overwhelming evidence of a crime, but because of her political affiliation, her outspokenness, or her attempts to conduct oversight into controversial government operations. Key to this accusation is the role of acting U.S. Attorney Alina Habba. Her prior and public association with former President Donald Trump makes her a lightning rod for criticism in this case. Democrats and McIver's supporters see her appointment and her office's subsequent actions as inherently suspect. They question whether the decision to charge a sitting Democratic congresswoman, especially when plea negotiations reportedly failed, would have been made by a prosecutor without such strong partisan ties. The fact that Habba herself announced she attempted to reach a resolution with McIver without pressing charges, but was unsuccessful, is interpreted by some as further evidence of a predetermined outcome if McIver didn't concede. The potential outcomes of this case are varied and significant. If McIver is convicted, she faces up to a year in prison, a devastating blow to her career and a stark warning to other lawmakers. However, an acquittal or a dismissal of charges would be a major vindication for McIver. It would also lend considerable credence to the claims of political motivation. Such an outcome could damage the reputation of the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey and potentially lead to calls for investigations into the prosecution itself. The case will undoubtedly be a lengthy and costly affair, both financially and politically, regardless of the final verdict. Beyond the immediate legal consequences for McIver, the case raises broader questions about prosecutorial discretion. The line prosecutor handling McIver's case, Stephen Domanovich, reportedly joined the New Jersey Attorney's Office recently as a counselor to Haba. He had also previously argued the case against Mayor Baraka, whose charges were ultimately dismissed. This internal dynamic within the prosecutor's office may also come under scrutiny. The perception, fair or not, that this is a highly unusual move by the Justice Department, as some have described it, will linger. It fuels the narrative that this is less about justice and more about sending a political message. Section 9. A Nation Watching. The broader meaning of the McIver case. The charges against Representative LaMonica McIver and the ensuing political firestorm are more than just another headline in a turbulent news cycle. This incident, unfolding in real time as of May 20, 2025, encapsulates many of the deep fissures and anxieties present in the American political landscape. It touches upon the erosion of trust in institutions, the perceived weaponization of the justice system for political ends, and the increasingly volatile nature of interactions between citizens, activists, and law enforcement, particularly around contentious issues like immigration. This case is a barometer, reflecting the intense pressures and divisions of our time. The fierce and immediate defense of McIver by Democratic leadership and various caucuses underscores a growing concern about the protection of congressional oversight. If members of Congress can face federal charges for actions taken during what they assert are legitimate oversight visits, what does that mean for the ability of the legislative branch to hold the executive branch accountable? This is a fundamental question of checks and balances. The fear is that such prosecutions, if perceived as politically motivated, could have a chilling effect, discouraging lawmakers from asking tough questions or investigating sensitive areas, especially if they belong to the opposition party. Conversely, those who support the charges argue that no one is above the law, including members of Congress. They contend that McIver's alleged actions, assaulting and impeding federal officers, cannot be excused by her status as a lawmaker. From this perspective, the prosecution is a necessary affirmation of the principle of equal justice. This viewpoint highlights the tension between the need for robust oversight and the imperative to maintain order and respect for law enforcement. The case forces a public reckoning with where the lines are drawn, and whether those lines are applied fairly to all. Ultimately, the LaMonica McIver case will be closely watched, not just for its legal outcome, but for what it signifies about the health of American democracy. Will it be seen as a legitimate pursuit of justice, or as a politically driven attempt to silence a critical voice and intimidate a branch of government? The answer may depend heavily on one's own political leanings, but the questions it raises are universal. As the details continue to emerge and the legal process unfolds, this case will serve as a critical data point in understanding the evolving relationship between power, politics, and the rule of law in the United States of 2025.